Convicts soaring over benches with NBA-level airtime. Full-blown WWE-style courtroom brawls that even John Cena would applaud. Flipping off the jury like it's a bold legal strategy. These wild moments actually happened. On today's episode of the Infographics Show, we're diving into the most insane criminal reactions to hearing their sentences. Number 10. Jalil Smith Riley. On the night of November 13, 2013, a young couple, Aaron Martin and Portia Brooks, were out on a date. The two had parked their car in a side street hoping for some privacy to do, well, couple things, but their night of romance would end in tragedy. Security camera footage picked up three men approaching the parked car from the main street. One of them, Jalil Smith Riley, would bend down and knock on the window with the butt of a gun. He forced Martin out of the vehicle at gunpoint and then proceeded to ask for his money. Martin wasn't carrying any cash on him though, and after rifling through his pockets and coming up empty, Riley shot Martin in the head. Afraid that Brooks' screams would give them away, Riley then leaned into the car and shot her twice at point-blank range. Riley would end up getting picked up by the police not long after the attempted robbery. He'd discover that Martin had survived his gunshot wound to the head, albeit with severe brain damage. Brooks died, however, of her wounds 3 days later in the hospital. Brooks' sister would bring her ashes every day to Riley's trial, telling the judge, "I have to deal with life without Portia, so he should have to deal with life without parole." Riley would end up asking for leniency, breaking down into tears and asking the judge to please let me come home one day. His pleas would fall on deaf ears though, as Riley would end up getting life without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 11 years for attempted robbery. Any pretense of living the thug life fled Riley's body as he collapsed into a sobbing mess in the middle of the courtroom. Number 9. Diana Lovejoy. Diana Lovejoy and her ex-husband, Greg Mulvihill, were caught in a vicious custody dispute over their infant son. On the night of the 1st of September 2016, Mulvihill received an anonymous phone call with a male voice saying that he had incriminating evidence against him. The caller said that a copy of the evidence would be taped to a utility pole along a dirt path in Carlsbad, California. Mulvihill did what any suspicious person would do. He grabbed a baseball bat and asked a neighbor to come along, fearful that his unstable ex-wife was either blackmailing him or setting him up to get jumped. What he didn't know was just how far his ex-wife, Diana Lovejoy, would go to gain custody of their child. When Mulvihill arrived at the described location, he found a package taped to a utility pole as promised, and a gunman hiding behind a bush. The shooter suddenly opened fire, striking Mulvihill in the side before fleeing. Naturally, Lovejoy would be the immediate prime suspect. She had been vocal about having to share custody of her son and pay $120,000 in alimony to her now ex-husband. A week later, she was picked up, and she soon implicated her then-boyfriend, Weldon McDavid, in a plot to kill Mulvihill. Lovejoy's reaction to hearing her sentence, 26 years to life in prison, would soon go viral, with her being so stunned by the development that she collapsed in court. In the background, Lovejoy's relatives can be heard crying out for the would-be murderer as Lovejoy's head lands a satisfying thunk on the courtroom table. Not all the defendants are remorseful, though. Our next defendant tried to initiate a WWE brawl in the middle of the courtroom, starring himself and the judge announcing his sentencing. Have you ever dreamed of creating your own website but found the process too daunting, expensive, or time-consuming? Say goodbye to those concerns because today's sponsor, Odoo, has revolutionized website building, making it simple, fast, and accessible for everyone. With Odoo's website builder, crafting a professional, beautiful website takes just a few clicks. No coding required. Whether you're a small business owner, freelancer, or pursuing a passion project, having a website is an essential tool to share your vision and build trust with your audience. Thanks to Odoo's intuitive drag-and-drop interface, designing your site feels effortless. Plus, their AI-powered tools assist with everything from polishing your text to generating fresh content in seconds. Need a line written to sound more engaging? Done. Want a call to action that truly converts? Odoo has you covered. And the best part? Your first app with Odoo is completely free. That is free forever, including unlimited hosting, customer support, and even a custom domain for the first year. No hidden fees, no surprises. Don't wait. Click the link in the description to try Odoo's free website builder today and bring your ideas to life. Building the website you've always imagined has never been easier. Number 8. Debra Ren. Known as the Judge Jumper, Debra Ren would go viral after a video of his reaction to hearing a judge announcing his sentencing. Ren was in court facing a charge for attempted battery with substantial bodily harm. In the middle of the trial, Ren made a plea for leniency, stating that he didn't believe he should go to prison despite his previous criminal history. The judge asked him if he had reviewed that criminal history, to which Redden admitted that he had lived it. At this point, the judge decided that given Redden's prior violent history, she needed to install a harsher punishment than he had been hoping for. As she launched into her sentencing, Redden himself decided that the best way to convince this judge of his reformed, peaceful character was to violently attack her. Redden leapt out from behind the defendant's desk and ran at the judge, leaping into the air like Superman in an attempt to get at her. Redden would be immediately grappled by a court aide and the bailiff, protesting the injustice of being restrained for a casual attempt at savagely assaulting the judge. Surprisingly, weeks later, the judge would hand down her sentence, 19 to 48 months in prison for the battery charge as he was initially in court for. And if that wasn't enough, Redden's courtroom theatrics earned him an upgraded prize, an attempted murder charge for the failed judge attack. Turns out that attacking your judge is not a great strategy for winning your court case, but that's hardly a deterrent for our next defendant. Number 7. Melissa Hardwick. Melissa Hardwick and her husband were undergoing a divorce, but it seems that Melissa wasn't content to let romance die. The separation didn't end the drama, it fueled it. Unwilling to let go, she harassed her husband so relentlessly he had no choice but to seek a restraining order. Melissa's interruptions during her husband's testimony were so relentless that the judge was forced to intervene, repeatedly warning her to stay silent. Undeterred, she ignored the warnings and kept disrupting, prompting the judge to issue a final ultimatum. One more outburst and she'd be held in contempt of court. Now that's just a slap on the wrist if you're rich, but it's a guaranteed fast pass to jail if you're not, because, well, America. Melissa, inspired by the judge's warning, immediately apologized and sat quietly for the rest of the proceedings. Just kidding. Melissa embraced her inner Kentucky rebel and yeeted herself with the same reckless abandon as Confederate General John Bell Hood hurled his troops at Union fortifications in Franklin in 1864. Predictably, that ended in total disaster, just like Hood's charge. Melissa charged at the judge, likely screaming, "The South shall rise again," as she leapt onto the bench. Her rebellion was short-lived, though, as court staff promptly dragged her off the judge's desk and body-slammed her to the floor, ensuring the only thing rising was the bailiff's blood pressure. Her 10-day sentence would end up becoming a 120-day prison stay, giving the world a front-row seat to the chaos that likely drove her estranged husband to seek a restraining order in the first place. If you think it's only the judges that are in danger in the courtroom, then you would be mistaken, because you would never believe who this defendant ended up attacking at his sentencing. Number 6. Joseph Zyer. Now, Joseph Zyer is about as foul a human being as they come. 30 years ago, he broke into a Southwest Florida home, brutally assaulted and murdered an 11-year-old girl and her babysitter. The girl's mother came home to the horrifying scene, bloody corpses that would haunt her forever, and called 911. Despite the heinousness of the crime, it would take decades and advancements in DNA technology to finally bring Zyer to justice. Zyr's defense attorney tried everything in his power to spare him the death sentence, but given that Zyer was already on trial for another sexual assault, that was unlikely. Zyer wouldn't help his case much at all either, flipping off the jury and screaming obscenities from the stand like he was auditioning for Most Hated Defendant of the Year. Shockingly, the jury was not charmed by these antics. After careful deliberation, they recommended the death sentence for Zyer. Fast forward to Zyr's sentencing. With a death penalty expected, Zyer entered the courtroom and then asked for a private chat with his attorney. What happened next shocked the entire courtroom. It seems he wasn't particularly impressed by his attorney's performance. While Joseph Zyer is the human equivalent of a dumpster fire that can't extinguish fast enough behind bars, he did provide an unintentionally valuable lesson in self-defense. Punches, while satisfying, often lead to amateurs injuring themselves as much as their target. An elbow to the face, however, is a game-changer, delivering maximum impact with minimal risk to your own fragile bones. Even monsters can offer teachable moments. Our next entry is oddly satisfying when you find out just how awful the defendant would turn out to be. Number 5. Candice Cook. Candice Cook was 18 years old when she and her boyfriend struck upon the perfect foolproof criminal plan. Signing up for a dating app, Kyandria was the face of the operation, luring in Perry Nita of Palm Coast, Florida, to meet up for a date. When Perry and a friend he had brought for safety showed up to the remote location, however, Kyandria and her boyfriend were waiting with a gun. Perry would end up getting shot and seriously injured as the two made their getaway. The two teenage criminal masterminds could not resist striking again just 48 hours later, but they made one fatal flaw: using a dating app to orchestrate their scheme. Because nothing says airtight alibi quite like leaving the police a digital trail, complete with the entire plan, Kyandria's face, and a full photo gallery to boot. Kyandria's defense attorney promised that because she was just a teenager, she would get probation. Her and her family were so confident in the light sentencing that when the judge dropped an absolute bombshell of 20 years in prison, Kyandria and her mother would go viral for their shared reaction. Kyandria would beg for leniency, and a judge would allow new attorneys to argue her case. Temporarily released on bail, Kyandria was warned not to contact her boyfriend, the other defendant, which she promptly did, violating the court order. In the end, Kyandria would only succeed in getting her 20-year sentence down to just 11 years. Now, if you ask us, anyone who watches their boyfriend shoot someone and then agrees to do it all over again just 2 days later deserves a full 20-year sentence, teenage or not. Not only is our next reaction explosive, you will never guess what led to this defendant committing a double homicide. Seriously, pause the video and write your best guess in the comments, and then edit your comment with if you were right or not. Number 4. Andrew Worth. Sunday, December 6, 2009. It was a rowdy night at the Rock Bottom Saloon and Eatery. Country music blared as couples danced and the bar was packed full of thirsty patrons. Jennifer Lewick and Greg Peters were apparently feeling a little extra that night. Lewick spotted Andrew Worth over by the bar, and as she passed by, playfully pinched his butt, proving that some thirsts aren't quenched by beer alone. We told you you would never guess. It seems Worth didn't appreciate this, and Lewick should have known better, as she was an off-duty cop. The three got into a verbal confrontation over the butt pinching that ended up spilling outside into the parking lot. There, the fight got briefly physical, with Worth shooting and killing both Lewick and Peters. Worth would end up getting 10 years in prison and 10 years supervision after his charges were reduced when his attorney successfully argued self-defense. However, his outburst would come not at the announcement of his sentence, but rather after his bail was set at $1 million. It's not known what happened just prior to this, but it's believed that Worth may have been trying to get at the victim's family, seated somewhere behind him. Ironically, Worth sported a neck tattoo that boldly proclaimed "nothing to lose." Turns out he had 10 years of his life to lose. Funny how life works out like that. You won't believe how our next defendant managed to turn a simple misdemeanor into serious jail time, and it was all caught on tape. Number 3. Daryl Jerel. In most cases, trespassing is a minor misdemeanor. It's usually a small fine, maybe some parole if you really push your luck, but in rare instances, the stakes skyrocket. Trespass on the wrong property, say a top-secret government installation, and you might not just go to jail, you might not go home at all. Those lethal forces authorized signs are not suggestions, they are legally binding promises. But Daryl Jerel was facing a simple misdemeanor charge for trespassing with a light fine. As the judge set an official court date, Jerel grew angry because he wanted an earlier trial, but a logistical issue between the judge and Jerel's attorneys had resulted in a later court date. Jerel, however, had plans to leave Michigan, and now he had to stay. Jerel expressed his fondness for Michigan in the following way, saying, quote, "I am tired of this state. I'm ready to leave this state as soon as possible. You guys can kiss my ass." The judge, visibly baffled, couldn't understand why anyone wouldn't fall head over heels for Michigan, a state where it is freezing most of the year. Growing agitated at Jerel's lack of enthusiasm, the judge seemed personally offended, as if Michigan's charm needed defending. He warned that if Jerel didn't speak with respect, he would be held in contempt of court, which comes with a 93-day jail sentence. Jerel, however, was dead set on visiting the most luxurious establishment anywhere in Michigan before he left the state: its prisons. If that judge looks familiar, it's because he was the same judge who had to deal with a man calling into his remote court hearing with a suspended license while driving a car. Judges have been victimized a lot by people not taking their sentencing well, but our next judge decided to finally fight back. Number 2. Sidney Newsom. Sidney Newsom was facing charges for domestic violence and scheduled to appear before a judge to go over a part of his case. Growing angry at the judge, Newsom was led away by the bailiff. And that's when Newsom decided that the best way to prove he wasn't capable of domestic violence was by getting violent. First, he tries to wrestle free from the bailiff, only to fail. He then decides to simply throw a stack of papers at him. Working his way toward the bench, he grabs hold of a telephone and hurls it at the judge before being dragged back again. This is when the judge decides to take matters into his own hands and rushes Newsom, pinning him to the desk. It's good that Newsom was handcuffed. Who knows what might have happened if his hands had been free and he'd been able to fight back even harder. Our #1 video is the most explosive brawl you'll ever see in a courtroom, and when you find out why it started, you'll be hard-pressed to find the instigators at fault. Number 1. Victor Nathaniel Rivas. Okay, we're about to throw a curveball at you. This time it is not the judge or a defendant getting into a brawl, it's half the courtroom. Victor Nathaniel Rivas was standing trial for the murder of a 15-year-old Ethan Soto in a shooting death. While waiting to appear in front of the judge alongside other inmates, Rivas spotted Soto's grieving family in the courtroom and decided to make a rude gesture at them. What the gesture was is unknown, but what happened next is a matter of record. One of Soto's relatives jumped the railing and began immediately beating on the murderer. 3 other family members soon joined, stomping, kicking, and punching Rivas as he got dragged down onto the floor. The family members would be charged with assault, but if you ask us, it was worth it. Which reaction blew your mind the most? Got a crazier one we didn't cover? Share your courtroom chaos in the comments below. Now go check out Most Insane Plan to Escape Death Row, or click this other video instead.